Good afternoon, everyone. I am Commissioner Zoe. I am your Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for North Yorkshire and York, and welcome to my public accountability meeting for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. So going to the agenda, so agenda item 1, there are 2 apologies from Tom and Caroline. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting and any actions. There's just to note that the minutes from the previous meeting are recorded and published onto the OPFCC website, but there are no updates or actions. So agenda item 3, questions from the public. So we have rather a lot of questions today, so I don't intend to read them all out. I think they're going to be shared on the screen now for everybody to go through them and read them separately. So we'll just keep them on the screen for a little while so everybody can read them. Do you want to go to the next one, please? Simon, could you go to the next page of questions, please? Thank you. And then the next page, thank you. Right, now all these questions should be addressed in the presentation that you're going to hear today, but if they're not, and we're going to keep a tally on them, we'll come back to these questions after the presentation so they can be answered. Okay. So I'm just going to introduce this and say that the risk and resource model sets out the risk in our county and city and how we will deploy fire resources to address and reduce the risk. It ensures that our firefighters and staff are in the right place at the right time to deliver the right and the most appropriate service with the right equipment and skills in the best possible way. The purpose of the PAN today is to go through the proposals set out in the new risk and resource proposals, which I am now consulting on until the 14th of August. So I'm going to hand over now to the Interim Chief Fire Officer, John Foster, who's going to talk you through the proposal. Over to you, John. Thank you. John, you need to come off mute. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I just check you can hear me okay now?
We can, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to run through a presentation this afternoon which sets out, as the Commissioner said, a range of proposals and the rationale of how we've come to those proposals. So can we get the presentation loaded up, please? Whilst we're just waiting for this, we call this locally in North Yorkshire the risk and resource model, and the plan which we've put together will cover the period of 2022 through to 2025. Next slide, please, Dave. Okay, so just to cover a little bit of background on what a risk and resource model actually is. The Fire and Rescue Service nationally have a range of pieces of legislation that which we must comply with as part of our statutory responsibilities. So the Fire and Rescue Services Act 2004 is a prime piece of legislation that sets out how we must operate as a fire and rescue service and sets out our legal duties to do so. The Civil Contingencies Act is also a very key piece of information, a key piece of legislation whereby we need to consider our arrangements with local partners, including local resilience forums and others. The Regulatory Reform Order sets out how we would undertake our protection activities. That's the fire safety activities. We obviously have the Health and Safety Act to comply with as an employer. And we've also got the Policing and Crime Act, which places a duty on us now to collaborate more closely with all partners and other emergency services. So when we put this together, we have a legal duty to work under that framework, but then there is the national framework document, which is set out within the Fire Services Act, that the Secretary of State must prepare a national framework document for fire and rescue services. And then when we look into the national framework document, the document sets out that each fire authority must undertake an analysis of the risk within their service area, and that must include foreseeable risk, so that we can understand the risk which we are required to resource. Then we've also got to demonstrate how our prevention, protection and response activities will reduce the risk that we've identified within the plan. And this must cover a period of at least 3 years' time span and be reviewed regularly. And therefore, when we look at what the piece of work we've been looking at here is, it's an overall profile of the risk factors within the service area, and that does include severity of fire, road and water risks, as well as other emergencies. It models how we will deploy our resources to reduce that risk. And when I say resources, this is not just about fire engines. This covers the range of resources that we've got at our disposal within the service, including staff which will deliver prevention and protection activities, as well as building resilience and response arrangements. And ultimately, this is about ensuring that firefighters and staff are in the right place at the right time with the right equipment to deliver the most appropriate service necessary. And that does include prevention and protection activities. So I'm going to hand on to Dave now, who'll talk through a little bit more about the work that we've been doing in relation to the community risk profile.
Thank you. So a risk and resource model basically starts off as directed through the framework to really get a very deep and
Dave, I'm really sorry. Can I just stop you a moment, please? Because I can't hear what you're saying. I'm just wondering if anybody else can.
So I can't hear either, Commissioner, and I just wondered if it was the connection at our end here where we're both based. So I wonder if somebody else based in another location. So Fiona can't hear either. So I think
I can't hear them either.
Working now? No?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you, Dave. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So just moving on from what John's just talked about there, the risk and resource model is based on fire services, North Yorkshire Fire Rescue Service, having a very clear and deep understanding of what community risk looks like in our service area, that being North Yorkshire County and the City of York. And we presented a couple of months ago about what the outcomes of the community risk profile were. But in summary, what it's allowed us to really do is do a very deep dive into a whole range of things that affect us as a service and our communities. What we provided about 2 months ago was a summary of, or a statement called the Community Risk Profile, which is a distillation of a very wide range of analysis into a very broad spectrum of things that we're responsible for dealing with as a fire and rescue service. So we've just set out that the national framework requires us to have a risk assessment, if you like, on foreseeable risk, particularly around accidental dwelling fires, road risk and water risks, and also any other foreseeable issue that we might have to respond to as a fire and rescue service. And that's what the community risk profile has provided us with. The community risk profile itself is a dynamic assessment of risk, and it's also a tool that we can use for decision making. And that's been extremely important when we move on to a comment in a moment around gap analysis, which I'll cover later on in this presentation. The CRP is now something that we can use across the organisation for strategic decision making and organisational change and development, right through to tactical planning and operational delivery of our full range of services, which, as we've just heard, include prevention, protection, resilience, which is really about our own ability to cope in adversity, and also how we support communities helping themselves. And then the last part is about our response, which most people associate with the deployment of fire engines to critical incidents. In carrying out the community risk profile, we based that assessment on a wide range of data sets, many of which were open source and come from very credible, reliable, relevant and sustainable sources, most of which are at government level. So we've of the view that we've provided a very robust evidence-based risk profile, which is something that we find is really informing our decision making. It also, as I said, allowed us to carry out a gap analysis, so we could understand our as-is position, and then we can take cognizance of what the risk information tells us, or the risk analysis tells us, and then we can look at where we need to move to bridge those gaps, and I'll summarise those in a couple of slides' time. And then basically that gap analysis informed us as a service in terms of what are the proposals that we wanted to further develop as ideas, which are now going out, as we said, into consultation over the next 12 weeks for public to comment upon. So the gap analysis that we were able to carry out in sort of a top line summary made us very aware that we had uneven access across the county to our range of prevention services. A slide or two to come, you will see a map of the county, which is called our combined fire risk, the modelling that we undertook around accidental dwelling fires, taking account of those factors that put people at increased risk of having a fire that leads to death and serious injury, was really out of step with our response model. And what you can see is where we've actually got medium to high risk is in places where we are currently finding it difficult to deliver our full range of services, in particular around prevention. Again, in previous public accountability meetings, we've talked about what prevention looks like and is for North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. And there is a very, very strong emphasis now on what is called early intervention. Many people refer to this as getting in upstream, getting in there very early, really understanding what are those factors that put people at risk of harm, particularly around road, water and fire. And that we recognise that we really need to strengthen our early intervention services, improve our activity, look at embedding further the understanding about what early intervention really is and how we go about tackling that, looking at how we can provide basically protection, well, remove, reduce or mitigate risk factors and add protection factors where necessary. The community risk profile allowed us to make a statement that across the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service area, fire risk is relatively low. But we also recognise that road and water risk are a significant challenge, not simply from a response point of view, or that is a factor that we've very heavily considered, but the wider issues around water and road risk for the members of the community, those who are living within North Yorkshire and those who travel to visit or work within North Yorkshire. We recognise also, therefore, we had an under-provision of our water rescue response, particularly around the swift and technical water rescue provision. We have a high level of automatic fire alarms. Overall, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service responds to about 7,000 calls per year, and just under 50% of those are actually categorised as false alarms. A significant proportion of those are generated by fire alarm systems within buildings, designed to inform and alert the residents of the building that there's a potential problem. But currently we actually send resources and responses to those automatic fire alarms, many of which are classed on return back to station once we've been as an unwanted fire signal. We are of the view that we have an outdated response model, We haven't significantly changed our provision for response in terms of where our stations are and our duty systems on stations. And we also recognise that we don't currently have a response standard, an outward-facing offer to the public, but we are going to be looking at how we can introduce what are called response principles, paving the way to forming a very appropriate response standard. And in summary, the gap analysis basically informed the service that we needed to redesign our service structures and about how we go about prioritising and focusing on the work we need to deliver. And as the Chief has just said, particularly focusing on prevention and protection. This is the map I was just referring to. What this basically shows you is a combined fire risk for the service area. This is around accidental dwelling fires. Our understanding of the factors that put people more at risk of having a fire in the home, which can lead to a serious consequence, i.e. death and serious injury, something that we did a lot of research into. And we identified, as I said, very reliable, sustainable, credible data sets that we're able to then use in a modelling approach to basically understand what the combined fire risk looks like. And it's been set out, as you can see here, as a relative risk. So this is relative to only those areas within North Yorkshire. We're not comparing ourselves with any other part of the country. But what this basically told us is that we do have a generally low fire risk in the service area, accepting we have the full range going from very high to very low. And the fact we've tried to present it in a colour-coded way shows you that we do have medium and higher risk areas on some of our borders to other parts of the to other counties, and an increasing trend towards the east coast. But in our urban areas, particularly around Harrogate, York and Scarborough, that's where we have the full range of combined fire risk, so going from very low to very high. And you can see those out in the 3 blowouts on this map. So I'm just going to pass you back over to John, who's going to take through the next slide.
Thank you, Dave. So this slide here just shows where our demand levels are and some of our challenges, actually. So we've talked very much about prevention and protection being very much at the heart of our plans here. But the other area, which is very much in the response area, is our availability of on-call fire appliances. Nationally, there is a challenge in the on-call duty system, and we share that challenge locally in North Yorkshire. And we report that month on month at the public accountability meetings, and people will recognise that we do struggle with fire cover at certain times of the day. And what this shows here is that our demand profile, which is the area in green on the slide shown, sort of gets busier from about 9 o'clock in the morning through till about 10 o'clock at night. That's when the peak of our demand in terms of incidents occur. But what we've also got on the graph there, which shows in the blue with the bar chart there, that is actually showing our on-call appliance availability levels. And around the same time, from say 7 o'clock in the morning through till about 7, 8 o'clock at night, our appliance availability levels drop at that point. So the point here is our busiest time of the day is when we've got our least number of appliances available. And so, this all hinges back to the availability of on-call fire appliances. So what we need to do is redesign the service, redistribute resource so that we can then invest more heavily in the on-call duty system to try and fix this problem. It's a national problem, but in the absence of a national solution coming forward in terms of reform, we feel that in North Yorkshire, we can make a real difference by reinvesting some of our resource into the on-call duty system. And what that essentially means is that the way we attract, recruit on-call firefighters into the service, we need to be designing such a service that we can take the recruitment method into the districts and make it more user-friendly so that it's more attractive to come and join the service. But we also need to redesign the pay and contracts and the way that we employ on-call firefighters, because we recognise there's a huge commitment from our on-call firefighters, but the rewards are not really there for being available. They come more when incidents happen. We need to reverse that. We need to put more emphasis on being available for on-call firefighters, but also make the duty system more flexible, make it more appealing so that people want to come and join us, and also, above all, stay with us. We have a large attrition rate of people coming into the service, finding it's very restrictive, and then leaving. And so our commitment is to redesign the on-call side of things, but that will need investment. Okay, so moving on to our strategic intent. This ties very much with the Commissioner's Fire and Rescue Plan and the CARE principles. So the CARE principles stand for caring for the vulnerable, and that is really at the heart of our prevention protection activities. The A stands for ambitious collaboration. So this links into where we really want to work a lot more closely with our partners across both emergency services, the local resilience forum, but also very much into the health arena. Realising our potential is the R, and the realising our potential in all areas to make sure that we're being as efficient and as effective as we can do. And then the E is enhancing public experience. So this is really all about the delivery of the service that we provide to the public, and making sure that we are enhancing that experience as much as we possibly can do. So in order for us to do this, we need to redesign the service model, and we need to prioritise prevention and protection activity right at the very beginning, so that we're looking after the most vulnerable within the service area. The community risk profile now shows us where our risk is. And so what this is now about is realigning the resources to remove, reduce and mitigate the risk as far possible as we can do. So that is our strategic intent with this piece of work, and that's how we aim to deliver going forward. I'll hand back to Dave now. I'll just talk a little bit more about the proposals that we've developed and how we came about developing those proposals. Over to you, Dave.
Okay, so once we'd moved off from the gap analysis I've just explained, and we obviously defined the strategic intent, we moved into what was called the proposals development stage. In order to do this, within service, we created a team, a new team that was able to focus very much on this work, and linking with colleagues from other parts of our service, and linking with what's called Enable, who help us in terms of some of the data modelling and profiling work. The CRP itself was a very good starting point, and we very much based many of our proposals against making sure that they align to that risk that we've identified, and how we can use those proposals to reduce, mitigate, remove risk where we best possibly can. We've just shared with you an example of one of the incident data dashboards. This now gives us a very good understanding of activity levels that we have within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. It's an interactive tool. It allows managers of all levels, from strategic managers through to operational crews, to actually clearly understand what's going on in terms of incident data, the information that comes from that. It paints a picture, and we can show that now on what's called a web mapping tool. So again, we can display information for people on a map, so they can clearly see where events are taking place. We can look for trends, occurrences, repeat occurrences, and again, it really helps in informing people and making good quality decisions about how to tackle the issues that we're being faced with, principally by learning from response, but feeding that back into our prevention services. We've just shared with you the on-call availability, and we recognise very much that on-call availability is a big issue for us in service. And we've just set out some of the things that we are focused on doing as part of what's called an on-call futures programme. That in itself sits within another programme of work within inside the fire service that we're very focused on, but it does tie in very closely with the RRM itself, because what we're talking about here is about how we properly use our available resources to deliver the service. And of course, on-call for us is a very key part of our service provision in terms of response. But we want to be very creative and innovative about how we use on-call staff moving forward. We, as part of the transformation programme, invested in new software that allowed us to build a workload, a base case using something called Workload Modeler. In effect, what the base case allowed us to do is to take data from our service databases. So we have something called Vision, which is our mobilising system. And for every incident that we attend, all incidents have a national level form completed which summarises what the actual incident was, and that's called the incident recording system. So 2 pieces of information we used here to basically recreate what we've done over the last 5 years. So whilst John mentioned that an IRM or an RRM needs to cover 3 years, we've chosen to extend that over a 5-year period, and it gave us a very good understanding of what we'd actually been to in terms of incident type and what resources had actually attended those incidents. And in effect, as best we possibly could, we recreated the last 5 years of operational response to emergency calls. Once we had a base case, that then allowed us to propose model changes. So if we changed a resource, or we moved a resource, or crewed a resource differently, we could look at the impact of that change. So we can do the modelling, and then we can do a comparison between the as was and the as proposed situation. And what we're looking for there is there a significant difference? Is it better? Is it very similar? Or is it a worsening situation? That was a really important exercise that we were able to go through to give us a really good basis for making proposed changes. The static response model is something that we created. It basically allows us to work out how quickly we can respond from a static place, a fire station or a other location, to any other single point on a map. It uses the road network and average road speed, but we can basically calculate where we can get to, and then we can group those responses into something called an isochrone. A bit of a new term for me in all this work, but basically that allows us to understand in a geographical area where we could get to in, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes as a radius from a single point. The gazetteer is a national gazetteer. It's provided by Ordnance Survey. It's called Address-Based Premium. That holds information about all building stock within our service area. It allows us to understand some features or attributes about the building, so in terms of its size, height, but also its use, and also its status. So, for example, is it in construction? Is it occupied, unoccupied? That sort of thing. So a really useful piece of information for us in terms of building stock. And then with regards to the workload model and some of the work, that was then quality assured by an independent third party. So we went back and asked for what we've done to be not necessarily modeled, but have we done it correctly? Have we used the software appropriately? Has the data we've been putting into the modelling tool been correctly sourced? And as the outcomes that we've got from the model, are they correct and allow us to go through that model changes comparison work? And the answer back from that quality assurance was very much that yes, it has been done appropriately, and it was very well quality assured by the independent third party.
So we have come up with a range of proposals which were presented to the Commissioner. And what we now want to do is show you a video which set out the proposals, and then we'll come back and talk more closely about how the proposals will work.
Okay. It's my job to gather your views and set the direction of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service to make sure our community get the services we need to help us to be safe and feel safe.
Is the video showing at all, Commissioner?
No, it isn't. It isn't, John. We've just got a blank screen at the moment.
Okay. Is there a way that...
I'll just stay with it.
Thank you, Simon.
Proposals for the fire services new risk and resource model. Set how the service.
We're not having much luck with our IT. Here we go. Thanks.
I'd like your views on the proposals before I make my decision.
Is it working?
Whether to implement.
It is.
Did it play?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you, Simon.
You're down. Sam is going to put it on.
It's my job to gather your views, set the direction of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service to make sure our community is safe. Hello, I'm Commissioner Zoe, your Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. It's my job to gather your views and set the direction of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service to make sure our communities get the services we need to help us to be safe and feel safe in North Yorkshire and the City of York. I'm currently considering proposals for the Fire Service's new risk and resource model, which sets how the service will seek to deploy its people, equipment and resources. I'd like your views on the proposals before I make my decision on whether to implement them. It's important to know that your Fire and Rescue Service has undertaken a thorough assessment of risk in our area. This looks at what our geography, demography, infrastructure, society and economy mean for how likely it is that an emergency incident will happen and how severe it is likely to be if it does. In our area, the risk of having a fire in your home is generally low, with pockets of higher risk in some urban areas and the southeast of the county. In fact, other emergencies, such as collisions on our roads or rescues from water during storms and floods, make up a larger proportion of what our service responds to. Based on this evidence, your Fire and Rescue Service has put forward proposals that it feels will ensure that it has the right people with the right equipment in the right place at the right time to reduce the risk of harm in our communities. If the service has to respond to an emergency, then it is likely this harm may have already happened. The best approach is to prevent emergencies from happening in the first place, which you told me should be a key priority during my Fire and Rescue Plan consultation last year. To achieve this, we want to increase our prevention and protection staff and the amount of prevention and protection work all our firefighters do to make you, your home and your community safer. To do this, we would need to change some of the ways we work. Nearly half of our incidents are false alarms, mostly from automatic fire alarms. So we propose to reduce our response to low-risk automatic fire alarms during the day, at premises where people do not sleep, to give our crews more time to deliver prevention work. We also propose to change the times of our firefighters' shifts to match demand and maximise the time they have available during the day for prevention and protection work, and introduce self-rostering duty systems across all our full-time fire stations to help create a more modern and flexible work environment. To increase prevention, we would also need to realign some of our resources to match our risks. In the York area, the risk assessment has shown that we currently have more emergency response resource than is needed for the risk and demand. So, we propose to change Huntington Fire Station from a full-time to an on-call fire station. We would keep the on-call fire engine and remove the full-time engine, redeploying the full-time firefighters to other stations or roles, including prevention roles. The on-call fire engine plus the full-time fire engines at Acomb and York would continue to provide the emergency response cover the area needs. In Harrogate and Scarborough, we propose to increase our ability to respond to any emergency during the time when emergencies are most likely to happen. Alongside the full-time fire engine, which would continue to respond 24 hours per day, we would swap the tactical response fire engines at each station, which are available day and night but can only respond to certain emergencies, with emergency rescue fire engines, which can respond to all emergencies. These would be crewed during the day only, which is when most emergencies happen. We would redeploy a small number of full-time firefighters from each station to other stations or roles, including prevention roles. When assessing our risk, we realised we didn't have the right resources in Craven to respond to the water rescues. We proposed to introduce a new specialist water rescue capability by training and equipping our on-call firefighters at Skipton to enter fast-flowing water to rescue people and save lives. Finally, we propose to introduce emergency response principles
to make it clearer what you can expect when you call us in an emergency. Implementing these proposals would mean we can deliver another of your key priorities from my fire and rescue plan consultation, improving the availability of our on-call fire engines. What we are proposing would mean we can invest over £1.5 million per year from 2025 to improve our on-call station availability. I'm confident that these proposals are right for North Yorkshire and York and would deliver the best service possible for you. But before I make my decision on whether to implement them, I want to know what you, the people of North Yorkshire and York, think of them. My consultation is open for 12 weeks and it's important that you have your say. You can find more information on my website. Please visit www.tellcommissionerzoe.co.uk and complete the survey to tell me what you think. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll revert back to the slideshow now, and we'll just now go over each of those proposals in a little bit more detail and summarise what our proposals will be. So I'll hand back over to Dave, who will run through these two proposals on prevention, protection and automatic fire alarms. Over to you, Dave.
Okay. So we've said throughout the course of this presentation about the focus and the need to really improve our prevention and protection work. As we've just heard, many people recognise why prevention is so important. The sorts of things that we attend in terms of our emergency response are often where people are in a very critical situation, needing our help to get them out of some very challenging situations. And it's much better for everybody all round if we can prevent and avoid that happening in the first place. So the proposal here is that we are going to strengthen our ability to do that by creating new roles in our prevention teams. It's currently quite a small department. We want to introduce new roles that cover both our operational staff, so basically firefighters, and also for people who work in non-firefighting roles as well. So new roles, a bigger team, really focusing on developing that understanding about early intervention, putting the right things to use to work with individuals, work with communities, address the issues that we now fully understand, and hopefully take it to a point where people are less likely to need our acute response services. Protection is what we use as the term to cover our regulatory and statutory duties with fire safety legislation. This is where we work with non-domestic premises, we work with businesses and commercial enterprises. Over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a very significant focus by the government on protection, really starting from the Grenfell Tower fire. Since 2017, when that fire took place, there have already been a number of quite significant changes to fire safety legislation, and there are more to come that will require fire services ourselves to have more involvement with other people responsible for regulating fire safety in buildings. We've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to invest in our protection teams by a grant afforded to us by the government. We've used that to create new roles where we're now supporting our staff in delivering protection work through training, better support through how they undertake that work, and making sure that we know we're doing the very best that we can in how we go about doing it, linking back to the care principles about how we enhance that experience of the public and how we realise our potential. But the funding that we've had so far has been in the form of one-off grants. And whilst we're seeing the benefits currently in that work, we want to make sure that we can sustain that for the long term. So we will be looking as part of this RM to use an investment opportunity to develop and strengthen our protection teams along with prevention, with increasing staff, resource, capabilities to ensure that we can deliver the best prevention and protection work we possibly can for the community. We've said a couple of times that automatic fire alarms are a significant burden on the fire service. We go to about 37% of our calls are generated by such systems. Back in 2014, we carried out a review of our attendance policy, and it was right time to carry out a further review of that. And the proposals that we're offering today are that we will expand or change some of the attendances that we currently have. So currently we don't attend non-sleeping premises between the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening. What we're proposing here is that we will broaden out that from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the evening. And we have had it where we will attend certain premises if we hold some information for firefighter safety. And we've reviewed that. So we will now only be going to premises where we hold information that presents a very high risk or high risk to firefighter safety. We're also going to be looking at the ability to charge for attending automatic fire alarms, the emphasis being the ability to, and that brings us in line with the national and regional picture. And we're also looking to review how we respond to automatic fire alarms. So we're going to remove the absolute need for all attendances to be done under blue lights and sirens. And we're also going to allow for the fire engine, once it's been deployed, to be available for redeployment to more risk critical incidents. And we will also be looking at an ability to deploy offers in cars, which is in line with existing arrangements for other types of incidents we go to, such as animal rescue, water rescue, and dangerous structures. Okay, John.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so we shall just move on to the next proposal, which is the Huntington fire appliance. So the proposal here is that we remove the whole-time fire appliance from Huntington, but we made sure that the on-call fire appliance at Huntington is maximised on availability by utilising some of the colleagues that will remain working there for a period of time until the on-call appliance can be fully supported on its own. Now, what this does, it releases funds of around £1 million, and that enables us then to reinvest back into prevention and protection, which Dave's just explained there, so vital going forward. But it also allows us to invest in the on-call duty system across the county. When we look at the risk profile of that area around Huntington, it is low risk in most areas with a slight increase in one or two areas, but those areas can be covered by York and Acomb, as well as the remaining on-call appliance from Huntington. So when you look at also the demand profile of Huntington Fire Station, it just doesn't warrant the full-time capability that we've got there. So that is the proposal there, and it will be about reinvestment back into the service. Now, obviously, there'll be some displaced roles from Huntington Fire Station, and the way that we aim to cover that is through our leaver profile. So each year we have people retiring from the service and leave the service, and so we anticipate that we wouldn't recruit for a period of time, which allows us then to redeploy the staff from Huntington elsewhere within the service. And as Dave's already mentioned, within the prevention and protection field, there will be growth opportunities there. There will be new roles created, and of course, people will be able to apply for roles elsewhere within the service area. So it's a measured approach over a period of time to balance out the crewing that will be displaced from Huntington. But really, to stress, this is about realignment and redirection of the resource into prevention, protection and the on-call service to make wider improvements for the public of North Yorkshire and City of York. Moving on to the next proposal, just to summarise this one, again, our demand profiles at both Harrogate and York and across the service area, actually, our demand peaks from 9 o'clock in the morning till around 10 o'clock at night. And that's consistent with the 5 year of data that we've looked at. Our peak time is also 6 o'clock at night consistently. And yet our change of shift happens at 6 o'clock at night. So our proposal here is that we change our start and finish times to suit that risk by staffing the second fire appliance during the peak demand hours. so that we're providing a better service to the public. The tactical response vehicles have served as well, but when we've looked at the effectiveness, we feel that they are going to be more effective out on call fire stations. So the proposal here will be that we remove them from Harrogate and Scarborough, and we replace them with a full-time fire appliance, which can go to all incident types, but we only need the second appliance during the daytime. We'll always maintain the full 24-hour cover with the first appliance. That then helps us support both the local areas of Harrogate and Scarborough and the surrounding areas where we do struggle with on-call availability during the daytime. But of course, the on-call availability becomes more effective during the evenings, and so therefore we don't need the second appliances to be fully 24 hours a day crewed. And like I said, the tactical response vehicles that come out of Harrogate and Scarborough will then be redeployed onto on-call fire stations where we feel it'll be made more effective because we can mobilise to certain incident types with crews of threes where we've got deficiencies. And I think overall that will provide a far better, efficient and effective use of those resources, improving the availability levels to the public, and our overall resilience to the public in terms of availability will improve as a result of these changes. I'll hand back to Dave now to talk about some other areas which are not needing full public consultation.
Thank you. So we said as part of the gap analysis, we recognised we had an under provision in part of our county. Craven in particular has, first of all, we've modelled and understand there is a significant risk there, but proven demand levels have meant that we've had to mobilise our current two nearest swiftwater teams from Ripon and Richmond into Craven, both of which have an approximate 45-minute drive time on blue lights from their respective stations to Skipton. And if they have to go beyond Skipton, obviously that extends that attendance time. So in order to remedy that, we're going to introduce a brand new team to complement the existing 5 we've already got in the county. And we're going to base that at Skipton. We're going to use or invite staff from Skipton to form part of that team. They will be trained appropriately to the required standard, as are all the other swiftwater teams. And we'll be looking to introduce new equipment, which means vehicles and the appropriate water rescue equipment for them to use in forming this new team. And we're of the view that that will then properly resource to the risk that we've identified in Craven and demonstrate how we're properly making sure that those people who visit or reside in Craven, should they get into difficulty, both in terms of swift water or possibly around flooding situations, have a fast response from the fire service. I mentioned earlier on that we currently don't have a response standard. It's something that we're focused on and we're wanting to be able to introduce, but we don't feel at the moment we can do that without doing some further analysis. So we are going to introduce what I call response principles. The response principles are based on 3 things. They're based on strength, which is basically what we call our weight of attack. So what resources will we send to an incident type? So in effect, how many fire engines, how many people, what sort of equipment or special vehicles will we send to that incident type? We're going to look at speed. So speed for us looks at everything that goes into forming the response, from the point of a call coming in, the call handling, the turnout times, the turn-in times of on-call or day crewed staff, and the turnout times from stations. And then, of course, we've got the drive time to get to the incident. And the final thing is around safely. So inside North Yorkshire Fire Service, we have something called a drive to arrive policy. Drivers or blue light and emergency response drivers and incident commanders are trained and are familiar with how to apply this. And we'll be looking to make sure that that is applied appropriately in terms of this principle. What that will allow us to do, though, is to take out a much more detailed analysis and evaluation of our response, in particular aligned to the 3 areas that we've set out within the community risk profile, that being accidental dwelling fires, water risk and road risk. That will give us a much more informed picture, paving the way to form a proposed response standard we can then come back out as an offer to the public with. And the final proposal here is for us inside the service to look at introducing new and alternative duty systems across all of our full-time stations. So we currently have what are called shift stations, which are stations crewed 24 hours a day. And we have what are called day crewed stations, whereby we have whole-time or full-time staff on station during the daytime hours, currently between 8 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening, and then they are responding from home on an alerter, living very close to the station in those nighttime hours. We currently have day crewed, self-rostering in a number of workplaces, and we're looking to extend that further across all of our whole-time staffing base to realise the benefits that we've identified, and as was set out in the video by the Commissioner, in introducing a very modern work pattern. Okay, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so the next slide we've got here is about the investment plan, and I will bring others in to explain this a little bit. But first of all, if I can just start by mentioning here about the proposals that we put forward here do deliver somewhere in the region of £1.5 million per year, which we can reinvest into the service. And I stress this very much. So this is about reinvestment back into the on-call duty system to improve overall availability, and then also to reinvest in both prevention and protection activities, so that we can protect the people of North Yorkshire and the City of York in a much more effective manner than we currently do. I'll bring in Michael Porter if he would like to just explain a little bit more about the finances and just run through the table if possible, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Not a problem at all. So what we've done is we've looked at the phased recruitment profile and retirement profile to be able to determine when we think we might be able to make some of the savings that are being proposed within the RRM. And we factor those in over the next 4 years. We think it will take around about 4 years to get to a point where we can fully deliver all of the savings that are in the RRM. Our intention then is to reinvest that, as John has rightly said, into improvements around the on-call availability, and we've got some planned over the next 3 years, and then we would look to fully implement that from 25-26. In the meantime, and when resources are displaced as a result of the proposals set out within the RRM, we'll look to reinvest those resources whilst they're displaced into prevention work. Clear priority for the organisation. We factored in what we expect our capital needs to be of this as well, and that's outlined in the tables. I know there have been, I think there have been a number of questions as well. I'm not sure if you would like me to kind of look to answer those as well at this point in time. Okay, important to emphasise that everything what we're trying to do here is in relation to saving to reinvest. So I know there are a number of questions in relation to borrowing that the organisation has and future levels of borrowing and future investments into estate. All of the costs of those future plans and future investments are already factored into our balanced medium-term financial plan. This is beyond anything that we've got currently factored into our financial plan. So that's why it's out for consultation, and we haven't implemented or assumed that any of this is included in our medium-term financial plan. So that's why we believe that, subject to all of the other things that we've got factored into our financial plans and all of the assumptions that we've got there, that we will be looking to reinvest any of the savings that we make out of these proposals to improve the service elsewhere within the organisation. So this isn't about us trying to balance the books. This isn't about us trying to deliver savings to meet future needs around borrowing or the costs of borrowing. This is about us trying to provide a more efficient and effective service as we move forward, and trying to provide savings from within to reinvest into areas that are deemed higher risk and of more of a focus for the organisation as we move forward. Hopefully that helps. I'm not sure if I've answered all of the things that people have have raised, but I'd be more than happy to revisit any questions that people have had or raised.
Simon, did you want to come in?
Yeah, Michael, thanks for that. Just to emphasise one of the questions that we have had from an interested questioner who I believe is a media outlet. One of the suggestions that has been raised with that questioner is that the organisation is planning a sum of borrowing for estates improvements in the order of £30 million, and I thought you might just want to comment specifically on that so that we can put those matters beyond doubt.
So we do have a significant level of borrowing factored into our future plans, and they're very much about what we would like to do in the future. We know, and we've talked about this quite a lot, that we've got quite an ageing estate, and there is a need to replace a number of fire stations as we move forward. So we would ideally like to invest in a number of areas. So we've started to plan that and factor that into our financial plans. The affordability of that borrowing sits outside of this planning horizon because these are long-term investments. So we will have to make some calls on those as we move past this. It's also important to reflect that other areas of borrowing that we've got factored into our plans, such as borrowing for fleet, for instance, that is not all entirely new borrowing because we currently have borrowing, and some of that will be due for repayment, and therefore we are borrowing to replace those assets, if that makes sense. So it's about replacement of things that we've already got, and potentially look to invest in the organisation in terms of the estates. So whilst we might look to borrow £30 million over the next 5-6 years, if it proves to be affordable, during that same period of time, we might have repaid £10 million, for instance. But the organisation has and does need to significantly invest in its asset base. It's something that we've talked about for a number of years now. There has been a lack of investment into the estate, and there is going to be and need to be an element of catch-up of that. What we've got to do is find a way to make that affordable, to be able to invest in what is a clear need to have better available buildings for our people to work from and for the public to access and deliver this service from in an affordable way. And that's what we're going to try to do over the medium and longer term around estates. Hopefully that covers that bit off for you, Simon. But if there's anything else,
Michael. Yeah, thanks very much. Do you mind if I just chance my arm and ask you another question?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So one of the issues which sometimes arises in the debate across the country in relation to fire and rescue service finances is the question of financial reserves, and the suggestion might well be that we should exhaust those reserves entirely before making any further call on any other sources of funding. And you're clearly very well placed this afternoon to comment on that aspect of matters in case it interests the public. So I thought I might just give you that invitation as well if the Commissioner is happy for me to put that to you.
Absolutely, that's not a problem at all. Yeah. So reserves are a very important mechanism for which we can support the organisation where appropriate, manage risks that we foresee within the organisation, and help us to invest in the organisation at the appropriate time. As at the end of the financial year that's just ended, we had just over £8 million in reserves. It's important to put that £8 million into context. So of that £8 million, £1 million is set aside in our general fund. So just about 3% of what we would spend on an annual basis. And we hold that 3% there in case of emergencies. So as you can imagine, this is an emergency service and things happen that are outside of our control and would put a significant strain on our budget. So we hold a contingency fund that we call our general reserve, which sits at just over £1 million. And if something significant happens, that's our first port of call to be able to deal with that, whilst we seek other sources of funding, potentially from the government or potentially through a grant bid to the government, depending what the circumstances would be. Outside of that, in terms of the other £7 million, just over £1 million of that is money that we're effectively holding on behalf of the government. They provided us with the money to invest in protection and to invest in other areas where they've given us specific money that is ring fenced to only be spent on those areas. Now we have to hold that until we spend it on those specific areas. So we don't have any leeway to spend that on anything else. If we don't spend it on specifically what the government have given us it for, we have to give it back to the government. So we hold that in our reserve. So it artificially increases our actual reserve level, but there's over £1 million of that. We then hold an element of reserves to deal with some of the risks that we have as an organisation. So as everybody will realise at home, there are some significant price pressures in the economy right now. So we are not immune to those. We are seeing price pressures on gas and electricity, and the same as everybody else is at home on their fuel bills as well. So we hold reserves in relation to both inflationary pressures for pay and inflationary pressures for non-pay items, and in total we have around about £1.4 or £1.5 million sat in those reserves. That helps us if we were to get a significant increase in pay costs, for instance, during the year, which we have no control over, or if prices continue to increase, then we will dip into those so that we don't have to make reactive short-term decisions to be able to balance our finances and our budgets. Beyond that, what we've seen over the last couple of years is some challenges in delivery around our capital programme. So it's been quite difficult for not just fire and rescue services, but other areas of the economy to be able to deliver certain aspects of their capital programmes, specifically in relation to the delivery of fleet. And therefore, there's about £3.4 million within our reserves that are set aside for capital expenditure that we probably would have expected to have already made. But during kind of the COVID and subsequent, there's been some delays in the delivery of that. So we have £3.4 million sat there awaiting to be spent on things that we already know that we're going to spend. And those things make up the vast majority of our reserves at this point in time. I'm not keen on sitting on reserves when the organisation needs to spend them, but we do need to get that balance right between making sure that we maintain a stable organisation and have some capacity to invest. Our current plans would see that £8 million worth of reserves decrease to probably somewhere in the region of £2.5 to £3 million over the next 4 years. So we won't be sitting on a whole host of reserves on a recurring basis. Our intention is to spend these to invest in the service as you would expect and deliver the things that we need to. So we don't have any real excess in there to be able to spend on some of the plans that we've got in front of people today. And if we did, we'd have to stop doing something else in the organisation, and it would only be a very short-term fix. Okay, hopefully that was a reasonable answer on the reserve side of things.
I'm grateful, Michael. Thank you.
No problem.
So the other question we are being asked is very much about displaced staff. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of ways we will manage that process, including development opportunities, future opportunities with growth and internal transfers. But if I can, I'll bring Jonathan Dyson in now just to talk a little bit more about that workforce planning. And also how we would work with representative bodies to manage that process. Jonathan, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yes, to answer that question, we, with our Enable colleagues, undertake continuous workforce planning processes. And this is to ensure that we understand now the demands on the workforce, on the skill sets that are required, and also on the ranks or roles that we have in the service. And as part of this, we understand that as when yourself, John, you retire in the coming weeks, that starts a process of replacement of around 22 members of staff to substantiate in those roles. And that's a large undertaking for our organisation. But as part of that, and with our enabled colleagues, again, the pipeline allows us to make sure that we cover that future aspect, and we also then understand where the vacancies will be in service, as Michael has spoken around there, alongside the retirement profile. So this actually presents us with opportunities for staff to be to move across the organisation into new skill sets, into new areas of prevention and protection, as well as opportunities within the current operational profile along retirements and also with promotions. So it's a bright future in that aspect around our profile and the talent pipeline that the service is facing. From an FBU and trade union perspective, we have and we continue to consult with all our trade unions, including the FBU, of course, and Fire Officers Association, and retain the on-call trade unions. Within that, and as we've been clear throughout the consultation and engagement process, this is an ongoing process and we will continue to do so. They have continuous dialogue with us, and we have explained our due processes around what the risk and resource model is, why we are making those changes, and what the future may be. And we invite them and our colleagues within service to be a part of that change and to hear their voice and make sure that as part of the consultation, they have an active and engaged part within there. And we'll continue to do that now through the engagement profile and, of course, well into the future. And we welcome everybody's views across the service. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the next stage isn't to talk a little bit more about the consultation side of things. We launched the public consultation yesterday, but I'd like to hand back over now to the Commissioner, who's going to talk just a little bit more about the process from here forward in terms of the proposals and the consultation. Back to yourself, Commissioner.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, yes, as you said, we launched our consultation yesterday and it lasts for 12 weeks and it ends on the 14th of August. That's for public, staff and stakeholders. And the decision will be made in the September Executive Board. Then we go into the preferred option stage, which includes staff consultation. And then we go into the implementation of the preferred options. OK, so John, is that the end of your presentation now?
It is, Commissioner. So would you like to change take the slides down, Dave, and then if there are any questions?
Well, I'd just like to say, actually, so I'd like to say a massive thank you to everyone in the development work, which I know has taken an awful lot of time and dedication. So thank you very much. And thank you to you all presenting today, which I think has come over really well. So I just want to say that I strongly support the process which the fire service has used to develop the evidence base for the risk and resource model. These proposals will best align our resources to address and reduce risk to keep our communities safe. So not only is it really important to us to get the public's opinion, staff opinion is really important to us too. And over the past 2 weeks, we've spent time briefing and engaging with the workforce, and we'll continue to do that through the summer period too. So I'm just going to look back to the questions that we were asked, and I think we've covered just about all of them, but there's a couple here that we haven't. And I just want to be really clear, because we've been asked a very direct question here, which is right from the Stray Ferret. And it says, how many firefighters in Harrogate would lose their jobs or be redeployed? So can I hand that back over to the fire service for someone to answer that, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question, Commissioner. So when we change the tactical response vehicle out, currently tactical response vehicle is crewed with 3 firefighters and not 4, which is a standard minimum for a large scale fire appliance. So it's only crewed with 3, whereas the first appliance at Harrogate would ideally be crewed with 4 or 5 preferably. And so when we change that vehicle out and we put a standard fire appliance back in there, it means that during the daytime we will have to increase levels to what they currently are. But of course, we don't need that for the full 24-hour period during the daytimes only. When we couple that alongside the self-rostering proposals that we would like to bring in terms of the duty systems, we anticipate that there would be a reduction of 5 posts overall at Harrogate, and the similar applies to Scarborough. So it would be 5 at Harrogate, which is back to the question.
But can we just be clear, John, that is through the retirement profile, isn't it? That, you know, nobody's actually losing their jobs. So
yeah, exactly that. We would look towards the retirement profile, and we would look towards redeployment opportunities, and we would look also to the growth opportunities within the prevention protection areas there. And I must also say that this is a progressive approach. As Jonathan's just explained there are some really good opportunities for our firefighters here to branch into other areas if they chose to. If not, that's fine. But there's a range of different alternatives there which we will help, and we'll work very closely with representative bodies to manage this process in the best way that we possibly can do.
Thank you, John. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions about the tactical response vehicles. So one is, will the tactical response vehicles be decommissioned and not replaced after their disastrous introduction?
No, and first of all, I'd say it wasn't a disastrous introduction. You know, these vehicles have been very effective and remain very effective, but we just feel now that there's a more effective way of staffing these, and by placing them on-call fire stations, that we feel that we can improve the overall effectiveness where we really struggle with crewing by mobilising them with crews of 3 in those areas, but also supported by the whole time crews now during the daytime at Harrogate and Scarborough with full-size fire appliances as well. So the tactical response vehicles will remain within service. They remain very much a key part of our fleet and our response profile. So they're not going to be scrapped. They will be reused, and they will be used where we can make more effective use out of them for the protection of the public in North Yorkshire and the City of York.
Thanks very much, John. Now, I don't believe we've had any more questions come in, and I'm fairly certain we've covered all those questions as well that have been submitted now. So I'm going to move on with the agenda. We're going to go to agenda item 5, which is the performance update and any questions on it from Jonathan Dyson, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll give a précis of the performance considering the time. I'll just share this pack. Has that shared?
It has.
Okay, just to, we have realigned our how we mine our data into a new profile so that it will align with the public accountability meetings. As a result of that, and so that we don't present data that were presented in the previous month, we've decided to give the public an overview of the financial reporting years for the last 3 years. Now into our incident overview. You can see in 2021, particularly on the chart on the left-hand side, that we responded to around 1,000 fewer fire calls throughout the lockdown period, or particularly over that financial year. Now, this gave us a marked decrease in the special service calls, which also includes road traffic collisions. And of course, because of the lockdown periods, we saw a significant reduction in those that type of call and also the collisions. However, we also saw an increase in small fires, particularly in domestic settings, such as in gardens, when members of the public were burning refuse and rubbish because of the waste disposal sites were actually closed. And then we saw an increase also in areas where public recreation areas, when the public were allowed back into areas for recreation once the lockdown had passed. Now, our top 10 incidents within the fire service, in particular within the context of North Yorkshire, our top 10 incidents remain fairly stable, as you can see from this area there. Where we have seen a growth in calls, on the right-hand side of the chart there is an increase with special service calls. Now, special service calls cover a range of incidents, but particularly one area is around gaining entry for other services, which includes the police and ambulance service. And this is where, if there is a medical emergency and those the primary responder there being the ambulance service are unable to gain entry, the fire service will attend, gain entry for the ambulance service and assist them then until that patient is in definitive care, i.e. the ambulance or they've been safely off to hospital. What we're also seeing, because we've now expanded our emergency response in rural communities through Pickering, Lythe, Goathland and Skipton, we are providing emergency first responder cover. And this is where individuals are able to respond from their home with automated external defibrillators to provide an intervention whilst awaiting an ambulance attending there. And this is also now showing, as we see, an increase within those special service calls. But that, of course, is an increased provision for the rural communities. On the left-hand side, we can see, and as is a consistent, and this is supported by the changes that we're proposing within the risk and resource model, is to then drive down the false alarm apparatus calls into false alarms in businesses and commercial entities, but of course still retaining our calls to as a primary response where there is a sleeping risk. Now, our overall fire cover. Within the period, as you can see there on the top chart, 20 to 21, 22, we saw an increase in the times when we were in a critical area, which is deemed to be less than or equal or 32 appliances available for mobilising across the county. Now, this is due to a number of areas, particularly, of course, in relation to our on-call appliance availability. And that is why with the RRM, we're looking to make that investment into there. What I can assure the public around is that they will always receive a fire engine when they make a call through to our control. And that is because we have an agile and dynamic way of working to make sure that we provide appliances, as discussed on previous accountability meetings, providing a fire cover model around the county. But of course, we have to maintain fire cover within the areas which have the most predominant risk and vulnerability. Now, our on-call stations. At the top there, you'll see that it says post cover moves. Our cover moves are provided by our operational staffing reserve crew and also firefighters at other stations, so that we move firefighters around the county, again, to try and maintain appliance availability in areas where it would otherwise have been unavailable. And on the next slide there, you can see that we do this because our peak demand comes at a time when we have fewer appliances available. However, what this doesn't I must painstakingly say is that, once again, we will always make a provision and always have fire cover across the county, so the public will always receive that call. What this does demonstrate is, again, the need to make sure we invest in our on-call service to increase that availability, even out that curve, so that we have a continuous system of appliance availability, predominantly, of course, and supporting the rural areas through the on-call. Now, our protection. It's good to say that across prevention and protection, we have seen an increase in the work that we're doing. Whilst we did have a decrease within the lockdown periods, our crews were ardently working with vulnerable members of the community in partnership with local authorities as well, to make sure that we made telephone calls into those staff and into those members of the public, and to make sure that they receive support as appropriate to their needs. We've also seen an increase, as discussed in the RRM, through government grants, which has allowed us to increase our protection staff, and this is something that we want to continue that investment in. And that has increased our productivity, particularly when we see, in light of the Grenfell inquiry and the unfortunate incident there, where we need to continue and make further inroads into our businesses to make sure that the business community are safe, as well as our domestic premises as well. And finally, our prevention activity. Now, we are rapidly growing our work around the safe and well prevention arena. We've completed over 12,000 safe and well checks, which includes operational staff and also our community safety officers. And the safe and well check builds on the home fire safety check, where we will go, and with the home safety check, we will provide smoke alarms where required. The home safety check allows us to step that further, and with our partners then signpost people into social or health related areas where the fire service continue to support alongside our partner agencies. We've also, in our prevention area, made further inroads into our road safety, and particularly the fire bike. Now, our fire bike is an initiative which is a collaboration between and supported by the York and North Yorkshire Road Safety Partnership, as it engages with riders out on the road and also with children and other key members of the public to provide that immediate education. And it's something that now we are seeing the benefits of, and through evaluation, something that we're looking to grow into the future. And I will take any questions if there are any there, Commissioner. Thank you.
Oh, I've just got a couple, actually. In fact, just one. And it's small fires in the open. Now, you did mention that. and they have gone up. And I know it's very dry out there. And I've noticed you've been going to quite a few jobs about small fires in the open. And I wonder if you could just expand on that.
Yeah, we can. We do see a seasonal increase within small fires, and this can be around school holiday terms, but predominantly, as we say, what it was driven there is for the lockdown periods, where we see an increase within our service delivery performance groups. This is where the group managers that are responsible for the emergency response will highlight those areas and then work with prevention and protection to provide an intervention through the community safety officers or the crews to have that visible presence, and work with community leaders or with the groups in the communities to try and drive those calls down.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. I can't see any other questions. So we're going to, and there's no questions from the public as well. So we're going to go on to agenda item 9, which is any other business, and which there isn't. And then agenda item 10, which is date of the next meeting, which will be Tuesday, the 23rd of June. But before we go, I do want to mention something, and that is I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you and farewell to our Chief Fire Officer, John Foster, who retires from the service in the next few weeks. This is, of course, his last PAB meeting, and I would like to thank him for all he has done for the service, for the communities of York and of North Yorkshire, and wish him the very best of luck for the future. So thank you very much, John. We really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you. So on that, I will close the meeting, and thank you to everybody who's been watching today. Thank you.